evening, everyone. As mentioned, I am stuck in an event that I can't leave. So I will be emceeing from my car. Apologies for that. I mean, not disrespect. But yes, welcome to Visionary Readers. We are going to allow our guest speaker to go first because he's got an emergency at work to speak to us. And then we will then allow all the other book reviewers to give their reviews. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sibongiseni Mgolozeli, to read a biography for our guest speaker and introduce the guest speaker. Over to you, Dr. Sibongiseni Mgolozeli.
You are welcome, Madam MC. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This biography is very short. I'll be basically reading from the back of it, called A Country of Two Agricultures: The Disparities, the Challenges, the Solutions. So Wandile Sihlobo is the Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, that is AGBIS in short, and the author of Finding Common Grounds, Land, Equity, and Agriculture. And that's all I can say, ladies and gentlemen. Madam MC, I think at this point, let's allow Wandile to take the visual stage and review his new book, this one. Over to you, Wandile.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Mgolozeli, for that, and good evening to all of you colleagues on the call. Let me start off by first, expressing gratitude for the invitation to join all of you on this call, and a sincere thanks to the folks that have been able to peruse the book. As you rightly said, the book that we're talking about tonight is not A Country of Two Agricultures, but rather this particular book, which is A Country of Two Agricultures. It's a difficult thing then when people say review your own book, because you spend a bit of time trying to put all it together, and you believe that everything that is in it is all of what's essential. People have to read every word of it. But I'll say a few things, not so much on the breaking down the essence of the book, by starting by saying why the book, and perhaps what can one expect as they are reading the book. So on the first point of saying why the book, I think I started thinking about some of the aspects that are covered in it right after my first book. My first book was titled Finding Common Ground, Land, Equity, and Agriculture. And what that book did focused a lot on the land reform dynamics. At the time of its publication, there was in South Africa all of this big conversation about expropriation without compensation, which had emanated from the ANC's policy position of December 2017. And right after that, myself and 9 other people were appointed by the president to form what is called the Land Reform Expert Panel of Advisory, where the task we were given was to look into what the ANC had said about expropriation without compensation, but also review South Africa's land reform progress and the dynamics and the politics of it from 1994 to the time when we were doing our work. We were appointed in 2018. And with the view then that when we had concluded that work, we would give an advice to the president and the interministerial committee at the time, which was chaired by then Deputy President David Mabuza. We did that work, but because the topic was so polarizing and many people were not sure if we were endorsing expropriation without compensation, what was the panel eventually putting out? And there were many divisions even amongst ourselves who were in the panel, given we're coming from very different schools of thought, very different worlds of training. Some were economists, some historians, some activists, and some in labor, some farmers. So there was all of that grouping. So right after that, after we had submitted our report, I thought it was important to sort of write a book where you reflect to people to say, how is policy in South Africa actually made? How does the policy making space begin when one is trying to put the policy dynamics on the table? What happens in union building, and how do people end up to positions that they end up having on policy? So that book walked people in that direction and eventually outlined what I thought was important on land reform. Now, having discussed land reform at length on that, I thought making agriculture almost synonymous with the land reform story was also a mistake, because it was important that we ensure that yes, there's a discussion about land reform, but at the end of the day, there's something that needs to happen about agricultural sector in itself. And the dilemmas then that one faced in agriculture was that when you look at the farming today in South Africa, it still looked very much like what you saw in 1994 or even in the 80s, in a sense that in the commercial output of South Africa's agriculture today, black farmers still make up less than 10% of that output. And the majority of it, of course, then being the white South African farmers. You go back to the 80s, to the 60s, the numbers aren't that different from what you see today. The question then was to say, what is constraining this progress? Why are we in this world where there are two agricultures, small scale black farmers, large scale white farmers? And also, if then we are trying to close these gaps, what policy measures have been taken from 1994 to today? And why have those policies not really yielded the desired results? And the secondary point on that was of saying, can the sector then grow and even have an extra inch of growth beyond just the racial dynamics part that we are discussing in the book? And I think the essence of this particular book was in that manner, where then I look back to say what has been done. Why have we not seen the transformation in a rate that we're supposed to have seen by this moment? And also, what is the scope for growth in the sector? Where at the end of it, it ends with the point of saying, look, the South African agricultural sector today can still grow by anywhere between 15 to 30%. Its gross value added over the next decade can expand by anywhere between 15 to 30%. But there's a number of things that needs to be done to get us there. Some of those are, of course, on the land release side, and the state has accumulated from 1994 from 2006 up until today about 2.5 million hectares of land that is sitting on the state hands, which the book outlines on where it lies and what needs to be done about it. The issues of agricultural finance, agricultural technology, municipalities that are failing, and as a result of that, weighing on the progress of the agricultural sector. Issues of the export markets. I mean, half of the book is around the trade policy and what needs to be done on trade. It reflects deeply on that. But I realized then that if one was to carry through this discussion of what can be done in agriculture, what are some of the possibilities, it doesn't end there, because we have agricultural economy that is intertwined with the rural economy in South Africa. And if any discussion is to resonate with the bigger grouping in South Africa, it has to be addressing the broader problems that the country faces. And the country faces about three major problems. It's a problem of higher unemployment, it's a problem of inequality, and low growth, and of course the problem of poverty. And the sector has to respond positively on helping us to resolve those. And there's a number of evidence that gets cited in the book, which actually makes a point that growth in agriculture is 2 or 3 times more equivalent, is 2 or 3 times more effective in reducing poverty than the same equivalent amount of growth in other sectors of the economy. So there was a case to focus on this, and there was a case for jobs and the agro-processing space. But to carry through this message in a coherent and perhaps also less boring manner, I had to use more of a narrative format, and I had to be careful about the writing style of the book. And I hope I achieved that, because many people have been kind of saying, look, they've enjoyed the book. So when you read it, while the topics that I'm talking about is more of a policy dry matters, but the book starts, in a farm somewhere in Bronkhorstspruit, and it uses different characters of people, where then you're almost doing like a case study where you're visiting somebody, you trace down their journey into farming, and then you begin then into their journey to identify where are these gaps of the policy that we're talking about. And in that way, the hope is that if somebody is sitting in a bus from Johannesburg to Durban, they should at least be able to read the book and find it more enjoyable. Because in essence, I wasn't writing this book for people who are experts in agriculture and rural economy or economists, but it is a book for all South Africans to say, look, we have this resource pool, we have this political economy problem of the diversions, racial diversions within the farming sector, and we have these problems in rural areas. As South Africans, then, how should we be thinking about this? And that's the essence of the book, or That's what I wanted to put in a conversation beyond those that are in the sector, but for the broader public to lean into that. With that, Bali, that's the summation of what the book really attempts to do, and its linkage to the previous work that was on land, on how different it is from that. Thank you.
Unmute first. Thank you very much, Wandile, for that. Wow, that was such a smooth review of your own book, and I like how you talk about your book. I'm going to open the questions now to the floor, the people on the floor to ask questions, but I would really like us to make this more of a dialogue, Wandile, and I would like to start with my first question. So in your book, you do mention, so in your talk, you mentioned that the book actually addresses policies, and my biggest concern or my biggest question here is, don't we have enough policies that we are tackling that we end up just thinking about policies but not actioning? Again, don't you think that we have enough policies that we're only thinking about policies rather than actioning those policies to make sure that we see the growth? Over to you.
Yeah, so somebody, the other way of thinking about this, I mean, there is always a deep frustration among South Africans who would say, look, we have been thinking about policies and we need to move beyond policy and actually get to doing something. And that's a fair criticism that everybody raises. But I think the other way of thinking about that point is to really have a recognition that the fact that policies are not fully implemented, that on itself speaks to some root of a problem. And the problem may not always be with the people or with the will to do stuff, but it may be actually also within the policies. Why are these policies that are being drafted not actually implemented? What is it with them that actually makes people not internalize and actually do about them? And if we agree on that, I mean, the reality is, having existed in the space and written or assisted in writing a couple of policies myself, is that we write some of these things, but they are largely more of a guideline, aspiration, visionary perspective. I mean, the case in point is the National Development Plan. We worked with Mohammed Karan, God bless his soul. Prof. Karan led chapter 6 with Dr. Vuyo Mahlati of that. But if you read the NDP, I mean, it paints a broad, important vision of what needs to happen in agriculture in its chapter 6. But it doesn't begin to give a technical advice about, if I'm sitting in Bizana or I'm sitting in Bizana, Eastern Cape, or Modi in Limpopo, I'm the government officials, what exactly should I be doing? And I think that granularity is something that is missing. So what the book then was attempting to say was to say, okay, now that the framework of the policies are like this, what are the practical steps that we need to be taking? What's the role of government and what's the role of private sector in doing that? And that's where then the value add was on. I mean, Minister Titiza herself, I mean, she was at the launch of the book, she was a discussant on this and gave a view about what she thought about this. And in another conversation we had in Pretoria, the Director General of the department, Tate Ramasodi, was looking into some of this, and he recognized some of the shortcomings that had been on the system. So the point is, yes, the policies are a broad framework, but for the implementation, there needs to be a clear, practical plan that guides people to do that. And that's been the missing part on much of what we've been writing as aspirations in South Africa. And of course, that's not to excuse the fact that the government officials, in many respects, they have failed dismally. I mean, if you think about the municipalities in Free State, in Eastern Cape, in many of our provinces, it's a sad state of affairs, to an extent that, in fact, they are anti-growth view that Pretoria expresses, because Pretoria can't develop economy or do anything. They can only make pronouncement. The real events of the real economy happens at a local level, and the performance there has been dismal. Thanks.
Wow. Wandile, you said a mouthful, really. You said a mouthful. I'm just sitting here now thinking that should then the problem that we're trying to tackle not be the lack of action rather than the policies? Like, should we stop writing those policies and actually think about how can we, the private and the public sector, the private and the public sector come together and make sure that we are doing something? Because right now it's a matter of, we don't want to do anything. So we know that we have a problem. Like, we're pointing out the obvious, stating the obvious. We know we've got a problem. but no one is willing to do anything. And do you think that now should be passed on to the youth? Do you think that if we give the youth the opportunity to partake in the economic development of the country, we will see a bit of change?
Yeah, I mean, look, the public and the private sector part of it, it has its role. It would play a major role on this. But I mean, we also have to have a recognition that when you're running, of course, then a modern economy like South Africa, there are certain part which needs regulation. And that is not something that can be led by the private sector. The regulators have to be rigorous and focusing on those things. But there is room when it comes to implementation to actually doing certain projects and the private sector. I mean, in the book I make examples of certain people that needs to import certain seeds or agrochemicals to register them that are important for boosting productivity on the farms. There are things like that where the government can be quicker on its part while doing its work in alignment with what are the aspirations of the country that the private sector is doing. So there is a role for the PPP approach. I mean, in the issue of youth, obviously it's a given that youth absorption is something that is important. But I do want to stress one point here. We should not take things for granted or place them easily as if I wake up tomorrow, I have young people running the DTIC, somehow things will happen, because there's value in experience. And South African economy is quite complex than many people actually tend to appreciate. It's one thing when you are sitting outside the system, it's another thing when you're actually sitting in the system and having to deliver and do things. You begin to have that deeper appreciation. But the point is on that, it's not to negate the issue. Youth absorption and the energy is needed because you do have a problem in South Africa because you have the elderly people that are running the government, politicians and in the departments. And then there's a huge layer below them where you actually have a large skills gaps to the extent that as the population ages, you may run into a crisis in South Africa where you actually don't have sufficient people that will, in a short space of time, be able to take over the rails and run issues smoothly. I worry about certain areas where I do see that there are gaps on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Actually, my next point was going to be about the gatekeeping, where we're going to run out of skills and all that. But thank you so much for tackling that one. I see we've got a hand on the floor. Lisawana Masiza, may you please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam MC, for the opportunity, and a special salutation to Mr. Wandile for this amazing presentation that he just done. So my question to Wandile is regarding what he said in terms of conflict of perspectives among the people who were involved, the economists, the agriculturists, and so forth, who were involved in this whole project, that there was that conflict of interest and perception. My question is, I'm under the impression that everything should be guided by the law. And according to what I understand regarding the law is that everything should be in line with the law. And if anything is outside of the law, then that must not be considered. So now, was there no law or legal principles that were guiding the whole process of coming up with this whole policy? Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Masiza, there was a law that guides the so Masiza, this is how to think about it. You get to have a general laws and principles that says this is what can be done and this is what cannot be done. But then beyond that, in any program, you actually then have to have a detailed policy of saying how then things should be executed within the frameworks of the law, because you may have differences of opinion and objective within the limits of your mandate. So we were having various views and approaches about how to do what we wanted to do, but all within the limits of our mandate. There were some that were saying, look, perhaps you needed to make sure that you keep land reform and do it in a market principles approach. There are some which says, look, the law is saying there must be compensation, but it's not actually saying whether compensation should be at market principle or not. How about we compensate at 40%, I'm making as an example here, and so that we can have more resources to acquire more land. There are some who says land should be given with title deeds. There are some who says maybe a lease is of this much could be useful. All of those are things that are acceptable within the limits of the law. But then you need to drill down and say, how should those programs be? And beyond that, you have to think about the delivery mechanisms. Because when you have written the policy, then you have to say, okay, this is a policy that the department can publish. It's a 30-something pages stuff. But then at a practical level, what should people wake up tomorrow and do? And this is where the plan is at. So this thing it works on a steps where you have the law, you have the policies, and then you have the programs of execution, and then you're able to deliver on that. So there were laws. So we were debating and having various views within the limits of our mandate. And it was acceptable that everybody should be as robust, because for us to attain the best possible plan, which I think we were able to achieve at the end, but then there had to be a discussion on that. All the first book was doing was to bring then color to people to say, how do we end up with these things that they see the government publishing? How do they come about? What's the evolution of thought and ideas, so that people have an appreciation of how these things come up? They are not things that are, somebody thinks about it on their couch last night, and then they wake up and they write them, they put them out there. So that was in that spirit, Masiza. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your clarity.
Thank you, Wandile. I think we also have a hand from Dr. Mgolozeli. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you so much, Madam MC. Wandile, mine is going to be a quick one. And I think since you know that I'm in the agricultural sector, I actually wanted to take you back to the roots, to the grassroots level. Since your new book, I haven't started reading it, but the disparities between commercial farmers as well as the smallholder farmers. So in terms of the disparities, that you know exactly what is happening, and also looking at the fact that specifically for smallholder farmers, kind of the knowledge base, probably the majority of them never grew up in a farm setup. So they got to learn later on in life about how to farm, basically. Now, I wanted to hear your views in terms of, since you're also part of the, possibly policymakers in the government, and you also know our Minister of Agriculture, Togo Didiza. And my question would be basically, what's your view on maybe in our education system, if we can try and introduce agriculture from the basic level, like in primary schools, and maybe have all those, especially in the rural areas. There's tons of land, and maybe I understand some of the areas might be struggling with water, but basically to have a practical hands-on experience in terms of agriculture. What's your view in terms of us incorporating agriculture as one of the compulsory subjects in the school system, public school system specifically? Because there are other views. For instance, we know how struggled most of us about financial literacy. The book that I'm reading now is recommending financial literacy as well as entrepreneurship as one of the subjects that could be made possibly compulsory. And in my mind, since I'm in the agricultural space, I think it would be a good bet. I would bet all my money into also incorporating agriculture into the basic education system. So I wanted to hear your views on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a couple of ways of thinking about this. And of course, the people that are in education, they have a much more sophisticated understanding of these dynamics than me. But the first point I would say is that aspects such as financial literacy and entrepreneurship, those are cross-cutting things that are as important if you are thinking about engineering, medicine, agriculture, and all of that. They are cross-cutting. So I would have be sympathetic to the view that those should be compulsory. But for agricultural sciences, I am a bit more reluctant to say that we need to make it a compulsory, in a sense that it is a specific sciences. It's the same way as saying taking physics and making everybody study physics, because then there are limits to within that discussion of saying that you should do that. What I would rather perhaps maybe suggest is to say there has to be a certain level of promotion of the sector, but not only of promotion, but making sure that the high schools, they are well equipped to be able to teach about this. The other thing that you can also think about it is actually just the revival of the agricultural colleges. If you think about Glen College, Fort Cox, and many others that are still attempting Potchefstroom Agricultural College, but they have certain weaknesses. But if they can be supported and then they can be back to its robust level, then you can have a situation where you have these agricultural colleges across all provinces of South Africa working as almost as an incubation to say anyone that will go on to benefit land from the state, they have to have spent a year on incubation and learning something about farming. And I would say then it is also within those colleges where the managerial aspects will be important in the financial literacy, because running a farm is a much more complex than people think. It's a one-way thing of knowing how to plant crops and monitor. That on itself is science. It's sophisticated, but then there's a business aspect of it, of making sure that your books are in order. So I think the agricultural colleges would assist a great deal on doing that, while the curriculum at the high school level ensures that it exposes students to this, it stimulates interest to people. But I would be wary of saying let's have it more compulsory across, while sympathetic to the view of saying financial literacy and the others that are cross-cutting. Perhaps there could be a consideration to have those across to all students. Thanks.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Wandile. If there are no other questions, I would like to thank you, Wandile, for giving us your time. I know you have a crisis at work, as you mentioned, but really appreciate you coming and giving us a bit of a talk about your book and also what is happening on the economy. I must mention that as you were speaking, I realized that I need a political dictionary and then Mr. Masiza joined in. I got really worried, and then doctor was like, this is now going to a PhD level. This is going to get really, really bad for us. But thank you very much for such an interesting presentation and the review of your book. We do look forward to reading it, and maybe one day someone will review it. Thank you so much, Wandile, and we wish you a very good evening. You can go and handle your business. You are free.
Thank you so very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sam. All right, so let's move right along to our next So our next review, a book review, and that is Veronica Rakwena to review the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. Veronica, if you are ready, please take on the virtual stage.
Okay, I am ready. Hi, Mbali, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Go on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Veronica Rakwena, and I am going to be reviewing this book. It's titled Mindset by Carol Dweck. It was the book of the month in August, I think, and it didn't get reviewed, so I thought I should just give it some place in the limelight. Okay, this book was influenced by, in the beginning, Carol Dweck's obsession with understanding how people cope with failure. What Carol thought was that people either coped with failure or they didn't cope with failure. So she was not aware of the fact that some people actually enjoy the process of challenging themselves and actually learning from it. What she did was that she did a study on kids, and then what she discovered while doing the study was that those kids were actually excited about doing those tasks. The more difficult the task became, the more excited they became, because for them it was an opportunity to learn, it was an opportunity to grow. So as a result, Carol discovered the two mindsets, which is basically the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset, people believe that you either have it or you don't. There's no in between. Whereas the growth mindset, people believe that human qualities can be cultivated through effort and practice and methods. So a small disclaimer, the author does acknowledge that sometimes effort alone does not guarantee success. That's where effort that's assisted with money, effort that's assisted with connections and education is a bit smoother compared to effort that doesn't have those aspects. So in this book, the author goes extensively to define the two mindsets for us. What she did was give examples of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset throughout the book, and then she would give real life examples of how these things affect people. For the first one, she says that people with a fixed mindset aim to prove their greatness. What they focus on is to validate that they are great. So, like, for example, a learner would put in little effort towards an exam because they are afraid that if they put in a lot of effort and they fail, it's going to prove that they're not geniuses. Whereas if they put in little effort and they pass, it's going to prove that, well, they can do it without a lot of effort. Whereas the growth mindset learners, they appreciate the learning process, they love a challenge, and they understand that failing a test does not necessarily mean that you are not intelligent. It's just a measure of your performance during that specific test. What I love, there's a quote that I love where she said, the scope of a line, you cannot use one point to determine the scope of a line. What she means is that you cannot write one test and decide that I'm smart or I'm not smart. What you need to do is keep trying, practicing, and then getting results, and then proving to yourself that you either can or you cannot. But then the cannot part, it's still very fixed mindset. Another thing about the fixed mindset people that she explains to us is that they are more focused on being judged. What they think about is that how other people are going to view them. They are very sensitive to failure. They take failure very personal. When they fail, some of them even quit and stop doing whatever thing that they were doing. Someone would quit doing mathematics because they failed in grade 7 or something. Whereas the people with a growth mindset, they love a challenge and they see it as an opportunity to improve themselves. They allow themselves to try new things. They allow themselves to take on challenging tasks, whereas the people with the fixed mindset would rather do the simple tasks to avoid the embarrassment that comes with confirming that they are not smart. And then another thing that the authors point out is that the people with a fixed mindset, most of the time, they don't get to fulfill their potentials. Most of them go around saying things like, I could have been a doctor had I studied hard. I am very smart. It's just that this happened, this did not happen. So they have excuses for why they did not make it in life. Whereas the people with a growth mindset know that they gave it their best, and they can say for a fact that I didn't get there because I couldn't. They don't blame things outside of themselves. And also because they put in the effort, they get to achieve way more than they planned as a result of their consistent effort towards whatever they want. They plan, and then when they get results, they sit down, they evaluate themselves, and they find ways to improve on how they have performed. Another example that the author gives is that of girls and boys in their adolescent stage. She mentions that girls are used to being praised, especially little girls. When they're young, they get comments like, yo, you're so pretty, you are perfect, you are very helpful. Whereas boys, they get scorned a lot and they get used to being criticized, basically. So when someone else comes with an opinion of them, they don't take it that much serious. But then she does mention that girls with a growth mindset, when they get criticized, they don't take it as personal as the ones with a fixed mindset. The ones with a fixed mindset, for example, you could say something to them, like something like you are clumsy today, and next week the person is still thinking about that and thinking, what did I do? Because they are so used to having other people tell them who they are, that when that one little thing just takes them off their route. And then another example is with sport. She says the coaches with a fixed mindset, they want talented, effortless players. They want naturals, whereas coaches with a growth mindset, they want people who are willing to work. You can be talented, yes, but you have to be able to work, because talent can only get you so far. Without work and effort, you're just going to go down. The funniest part of the book was the part where she speaks about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset within relationships. She mentions that people with a fixed mindset, when they're looking for a partner, they look for someone who is perfect, they look for soulmates, they look for effortless relationship, because if it's meant to be, it's not supposed to be this hard. Whereas people with a growth mindset, when they are looking for a partner, they look for a set of problems. You basically choose a set of problems that you prefer, that you can live with, and that you can work with your partner towards improving on a daily basis. Not just you improve your partner, but then you are both improving yourself. And then in conclusion, she says, if you want to spend your whole life doing things that are easy, shame on yourself. The one thing that I want you to remember is that you cannot draw a conclusion based on one result. So before you decide that you cannot do something, try it over and over again until you get enough evidence that you cannot do it or you can do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Veronica, for that detailed review of the book. I just want to open the questions. Please remember to ask questions. Let's engage with the reviewer and have an awesome conversation. That was really nice, Veronica. So can we please have Veronica on the screen? Veronica, can we have you on the screen? I have a question here. So you said that there are two types of mindsets according to the author. You said that there is a growth mindset and there is a fixed mindset. And as you're speaking, in my mind, it says that it feels like both these mindsets are something that are produced by the society. So it's either you grow up in a societal norms that puts you in a fixed mindset, or you grow in the society, or you grow up in a society that puts you or that helps you develop a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, either one. So my question is, have you ever experienced a fixed mindset that was working on your behalf, like that was working on your favor? So have you ever experienced a fixed mindset that was working on your favor, not against you, it was working for you? You are muted, darling.
Okay, thank you, Mbali. Yes, I think I have experienced a fixed mindset that's working in my favor. The author says most people are mixed, but when I read the book, I found that I lean more towards the fixed mindset, but then it has helped me in a sense that I'm a perfectionist. Sometimes it delays me, but then when I deliver, the quality of my work is very high. So it works for me, even though the stress that comes with it, because I stress over trying to get the best result. I stress over how I'm going to be judged. I stress over, even after getting the result, it's still not good enough. But then when I look back at my performance over time, like you can see that even though it worked against me, in a way, it helped me achieve amazing results. Thank you.
Thank you. Just something out of the question. Are you okay?
Hi.
Are you okay? Are you fine?
I'm okay.
Oh, okay, cool. Just asking. Sorry, I thought you were okay. I see Lisawana has his hand up. Lisawana, you may go ahead and ask a question.
Thank you once more, Madam MC, for the opportunity, and thank you again to our reviewer, Veronica. So mine is not so much of a question, but it is a commentary regarding the statement which you mentioned at the end, that she said that if you think she said you shouldn't conclude on your level of intelligence based on one set of results. She said that, you should do something and try it over and over again. And if you still are not able to get it right, then that's when you can conclude that you are not smart. So my commentary is that I find it interesting because by that she has this undertone that says, no, everything is possible. Anybody can do anything that they can. I mean, anything which they want, as long as they put effort and focus on it, because you cannot do one thing over and over again and still not be able to do it. So now, basically, she was saying that, according to my understanding, that everything is possible. You only have to try over and over again. You will get it right, as much as you have that mindset that is set towards achieving that. So she was just saying everything is possible as long as you want to give it a shot and you are putting effort into it. So that was just what I picked up from that. That undertone that was saying that okay, everything is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisawana, for that comment. All right, so we'll have Dr. Sibongiseni Mgolozile reviewing the book Money Talks by Molefe Powe. Money Talks by Molefe Powe. That is Dr. Sibongiseni. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam MC. Good evening, everyone. Yes, as Madam MC said, that is the title of the book I will be reviewing, Money Talks by Molefe Powe. Madam MC, before I finish, maybe after I finish, please don't ask me how am I feeling or if I'm okay or not, because I'm not okay. I am broke and December is coming. That's why I'm reading the book about money. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by telling you the structure of the book, the way it's structured, and then I'll take you throughout the book. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that in just less than 5 minutes. It's basically a summary. That's what reviews are all about. The book itself is divided into 5 sections, and then each section is divided into 4 chapters. So 5 times 4, that is 20. So in total, the book has got 20 chapters. I love the flow of the book because it starts with the mindset. I like the fact that our first reviewer was talking about mindset. You also need to get your mindset right when it comes to your financial issues. So before I proceed, the foreword of the book was written by the wife of Molefe Powe, that is Wandile Powe, who is also a visionary in our book club. She is also a member of our book club. And what I picked up from the foreword itself, I think those questions were actually eye-opening for me. And I think let me start by also posing these questions to you so that if you are not sure and your financial situation is decadecking just like mine, maybe these questions will change your mindset. The first question is, how primed are you for money conversations? Because most challenges that actually make us emotional are money conversations. Are you comfortable enough to talk about your financial situation, either to a friend, to your spouse, or even your children? I find that question very fascinating. And the second one is, what is your money philosophy? Which is also crucial, or basically it influences your money decisions in your personal life, in your family life, as well as in your business life. So everything in life, if you think about it, it needs to include philosophy. You need to have your own set of rules, principles, and values that govern that particular aspect of your life. So basically, those questions, I thought they are very critical to pose even to you guys to think about them. Now, before I got to the first part, the author started by defining wealth, because there's a difference between riches and wealth, or actually becoming rich or becoming wealthy. And as I thought about that, I thought, okay, I've been having a wrong mindset in terms of wanting to be rich. I don't want to be rich anymore. I want to be healthy. Not healthy, but I want to be wealthy. There is a difference. Let me give you the definition of the author. He says, wealth is defined as the possession of good character, good health, and happy and fruitful relationships. And in addition to that, you add what is called enough money that gives you freedom to do whatever you want and whenever you want it, or whatever you want to do. And I made a formula of my own definition of wealth. It says, because the word wealth starts with W, for me, my formula is wealth is equal to wisdom in financial literacy plus health plus enough money that gives you freedom to do whatever you want and whenever you want to. So that's basically the definition of wealth. So for you, you can basically start to think about, what does money mean to you? What does being wealthy mean to you? It's all have to do with your own definition. It's just like happiness or success. They always advise that have your own definition, because it seems like majority of people, they have their own view of what success is or what happiness is. So for me, when it comes to wealth, I think I need to have that kind of mindset. So to summarize the book, basically, I also was fascinated by the introduction. So basically, since I won't have enough time to go each and every chapter, I'll just decide to deal with the first two chapters, actually the first two sections or first two parts. So the first one, before the first part is about introduction. So basically, this guy, one thing I realize about him that makes even the book more interesting, he is a great storyteller. And all great storytellers, what I've noticed is they are great communicators. So he makes this concept of financial literacy much easier, even for someone who's not much clued in that subject. So I love that about his personal stories and the experiences that he has gone through in life, and relate them on how you can get your money management or your money skills correct. For instance, he spoke about the lessons in the introduction that he has learned, life lessons as well as money lessons that he has learned from his father. And the big takeaway, or the big incident big story that changed my mind was he did tell a story of where he was 13 at the time. They were in a mall and then they were actually robbed at gunpoint. He was quite impressed by the way his dad was just calm in that whole situation. Other people would panic and then emotions would skyrocket, and then they would just lose their mind. But his dad was just calm in that whole situation. And what I learned from there is, when it comes to your financials, if you at any moment you are in a situation whereby you feel like your emotions are overwhelming you due to your financial crisis, you don't have to panic. You just relax, because when you are relaxed, it becomes easier to make the right decisions that will eventually take out of that financial crisis. For instance, if you're swimming in debt. So that kind of storytelling, it was very impressive and let you actually introspect your whole situation and relate it to the money situation. So now chapter 1 is basically about mindset. So if you get your money mindset correct, it will become easier for you to reach your financial goals. The key quote that I actually love from there as part of the money mindset is, your habits determine your financial attitude. As you all know from the old saying, your attitude determines your altitude. So I really enjoyed that. And then chapter 2 is about personal leadership. Obviously, if you want to be a leader, let's say in the financial industry, you want to be one of the 1% wealthy people in the world, you need to know how to manage yourself, how to lead yourself, how to basically have the right relationship with your money. So this chapter is basically about that. He spoke about the 7 A's that you must be cognizant of. Self-awareness, awareness of self, or basically spoke about emotional intelligence there, because if you're someone who's very self-aware, who's able to lead themselves, it means you are able to regulate your emotions, especially when it comes to money, because most people get triggered when the financial discussion come into play. The second A is attitude. Third A is atmosphere. That has to do with your environment, appetite, authenticity, accountability, and so forth and so forth. Chapter 3 is also about relationships and money now. Besides those money mindset or the leadership that you have with yourself with money, your relationship with other people and how you relate with them with money. And by relationship, he explains that is referring to all forms of associations, either with friends, couples, siblings, colleagues. So we tend to borrow money from each other, and then we don't put the conditions in place to make an agreement. When is this other party going to pay back the money? So all of those things, they tend to disrupt our relationship with our friends and colleagues because we don't have the proper agreements in place. So it goes into details to advise how you can manage that front correctly. Then I see I'm running out of time. I think I went over time already, but there's so much more in the book, to a point whereby, as I was asking Wandile Sihlobo, he even advocates that if we want to be moving forward with our financial situation, we should start at the grassroots level. He advocates for introducing financial literacy as well as entrepreneurship in the basic education system. Then if we get the basics there correct, it becomes easier for us when you are older, maybe tertiary or whatever, to know how to have the right relationship with money. Otherwise, that's all from me. I am over time. Madam MC, thanks. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I can feel the passion there. I was actually going to ask if you're okay, but I'm not going to ask that. I'm not going to ask that. But yes, thank you very much for the thorough review of the book. I think what you have done is you've made us want to read the book. I do have a question. I'm going to open the floor for questions, but I'll be the one leading them. I do have a question, though. Doctor, there's this saying that I keep getting from people that we need to introduce financial literacy at a foundation phase. What is this foundation phase, and where does this foundation phase start, and who should do the introduction to financial literacy to their kids?
Good question, Bali. I think, as a society, we all have a role to play in the education of our kids, of our society. When it comes to the basic phase, I'm basically referring to the primary level of education, but it shouldn't start there. The parents themselves, education starts at home. We shouldn't only expect our teachers to teach our kids about whatever that needs to be taught out there. It all starts with the values, the principles of life, like respect, and you name them, respect, humility, and all those things. When it comes to financial literacy, because like Wandile Sihlobo said, it cuts across different disciplines. Our education, as we all know, our education system is basically preparing all of us to be employees instead of employers. And as such, it doesn't give room for us to learn these basic life skills like financial literacy, entrepreneurship. And as soon as we finish our school, we don't think about how to manage our own money. We don't have those necessary skills of how to basically get our finances right, how to budget, like simple things like investments, budgeting, all those things about it. We don't have to wait until we get educated through the commerce, like accounting and all those things, business studies. No, when we start at primary level, at least we give the basics of what this financial concept means, then I think we'll be in the right path. But obviously, like I said, we shouldn't give that responsibility fully to our teachers at school, but the society as a whole, the neighbors, the parents, and so forth, they have a huge role to play. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Doctor, for your book review. Now we'll move over to our last book reviewer, and that is Malihlohonolo. She is reviewing Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Malihlohonolo, are you on the call?
Yes, I am, ma'am.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. As our Madam MC has already stated, my name is Malihlohonolo and I will be reviewing this book, which is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So why The Midnight Library, and how did I come across this book? So this was reviewed quite a lot in one of the Facebook groups that I am part of, where they actually recommend some books. And it was written by Matt Haig in August 2020. That's when it was first published. I really enjoyed the book, and it follows a young lady. Well, she's 36 years old, and her name is Nora Seed. And Nora was going through quite a lot in her life. She had experienced grief. She was actually depressed. She had just lost her mother. She lost her cat. She called her marriage off quits, her wedding off quits 2 days before the wedding day. And she was fired from her job. She had a fallout with her brother. There was just so much that was tumultuous that was happening in her life. And Nora decided that she wanted to end it. So the night that she decides to end her life, she finds herself in a realm between life and death. So she finds herself in a library. That's why it's called the Midnight Library. When she gets to this library, it is midnight. And she finds her old librarian from her school called Mrs. Elm. And there, Mrs. Elm has got a number of books. These are books of lives that Nora could have lived if she didn't have her current life or her root life that she was so unappreciative of, that she was so depressed from. So what Nora got to do is she got to try on different lives. So these came in the form of books. So each book that she would ask for, it would be a different life or perhaps a past regret that she had, and she would be able to try on these new lives. More like clothes. If you go to a shopping, if you go on a shopping spree, you buy clothes and you get to try on different outfits. Nora got to do that with the different lives that she thought that she would always think, if only I had done this, if only I had went ahead and married this guy, what would my life look like? What would the life look like where my cat was still alive, for example? She got to try on these different lives. And I think one of the significant lessons that she got to learn in one of the first lives that she wanted to try, it actually helped her erase some of her past regrets. It helped her erase the regrets. She asked for a life where her cat was still alive. And when she got to that life, her cat died still. And because in her root life, she had blamed herself that she was not a good caretaker to her cat. And that's why her cat died. But to her surprise, when she tried on this life where her cat was alive, the cat still died. And she got to find out that the cat actually had a heart condition. That's how the cat died. The cat didn't actually die because it was ran over by a car, which is what she thought in her root life. So this actually gave her a new perspective on her life, and things that she had concluded on her own that they were her fault, which led her to her life to be so miserable. So she got to really get a different perspective and get acceptance from that. In one of her many lives that she decided to try on, when she was a young girl, she wanted to be a glaciologist. She got to try that on. And when she did, she had a very significant encounter with a bear, where she came head to head with a bear. And instead of being scared, she actually faced the bear and she fought for her life. And this, in turn, made her want to actually fight for her real life, her root life that they keep referring to. And this is what made her realize that she wanted to go back and actually live, that she didn't want to die anymore. She continued, though, to continue trying all these different possibilities in her lives, until the very last life that she tried, which is where she had a family, she had a little daughter, and she had her husband, and they were loving, and it was really, really great. But the one schlep with all these lives that Nora would keep trying was that she would go in there and she would have to try and figure out what is happening in that life. She basically had a high level of review because that's something that she would request. But once she gets into that life, she would realize that she needs to figure out where she is. Most times she wouldn't even know where she lived, and she would have to try and piece all of these things together. So the minute she gets into that trance, she would first have to try and figure out where exactly she is, and then she would decide if that's the kind of life that she wants to live or not. And the minute she would get disappointed in that life, she would find herself transported back into the Midnight Library where Mrs. Elm was. So with this final life, she was quite happy and she was satisfied, but she found that because of all these pieces she had to piece it together, but she felt that she still didn't quite belong, even though she was happy. So this really framed her perspective on success and happiness. And that's when she went out of that life and she went back to the library was burning. And then she actually grabbed a hold of her root life. And one thing that she realized is that the rest of the pages were actually blank. And it meant that she now had an opportunity to actually write her own life story and to bring about those experiences that she actually wanted to have. So then she ended up going back into her life. So her suicide attempt failed and she was alive. And then as soon as that happened, she was able to amend the relationships that she had that were in tatters. She managed to actually bring about a good life for herself. So I think for me, the Midnight Library is a book about hope. It's a book about courage. It's a book about finding closure and really accepting our lives and really knowing that we are responsible for our own lives and how we carry ourselves in our lives. I particularly enjoyed it. It was a very, very light read. It is about 288 pages long, so it's quite light, and I like the style of writing. And it was really good. And I think it was quite relatable. I think we can all relate with always thinking, what if I had done this? Or where could I have been if I had taken or studied a different course, or if I had done something different? So for me, it really taught me that I really need to accept my life as it is, and I need to do all that I can to bring about the necessary experiences that can bring me joy and happiness where I am. As I wrap up, I would really like to share with you a passage that really touched me. It is, if you do have a copy like this, it is on page 93, and it reads, "If you aim to be something you are not, you will always fail." I'll repeat that. If you aim to be something you are not, you will always fail. Aim to be you. Aim to look and act and think like you. Aim to be the truest version of you. Embrace that you-ness. Endorse it. Love it. Work hard at it. And don't give a second thought when people mock it or ridicule it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope that you will get to actually read this book. It's really, really great. And in true Mbalingosi style, I would like to rate it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 9, purely because I would have really liked that element where Nora would get into the lives and really know what the lives are all about, because I feel half of that time was wasted in her figuring this out. But maybe that's the plot twist that the author wanted to have in order for Nora to have a back seat in her lives and really decide if this is the life that she wants for herself. With that, I wrap up. Thank you.
You just know how to melt my heart. Thank you very much, Mali, for that wonderful review. Actually, so the questions are open. The floor is open for questions. I just want to ask you, did you find yourself in the book? So when you read the book, you can read the book and then you can relate to it. But sometimes you can read a book and then you find yourself in the book and you feel like this is my life. Did you have that moment while reading the book?
I honestly think parts of it, yes, purely because we're always thinking, I need to be doing this. I could be doing something different, or there could be more to my life. I should have studied a different course. I could have done this. Had I not done this, I possibly could have been elsewhere. So I really found that to be quite relatable. And I think that's why I really found myself lost in the pages of the book, because it was really relatable. And I got to try on these different lives with Nora. And in essence, it also helped me to come and accept my life for what it is and to try and make the best out of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Male, for that. All right, I will take it as I have no further questions for you. Thank you, Male, for the wonderful book review. Fellow visionary readers, this brings me to the end of my task as an MC, and I sincerely do apologize for emceeing from the car. As I mentioned, I had a couple of events I needed to take care of. Unfortunately, I could not drive home to be in a proper place, but I thought I will not cancel this one. So thank you very much for allowing me to be your MC, and thank you to all our book reviewers and to our special guest that was with us. We appreciate his time, even though he's no longer here. So thank you very much, and enjoy yourselves and have yourselves a wonderful evening and a productive week. From myself, Mbalingosi, remember authenticity is more about being in tune with your madness. From my heart to yours, thank you and good night.
Good night.